Mr. Fakler, we're going to go to you with story number 3, John Fakler. This piece coming out of Miami today. I'll read you the headline and read you the first couple graphs, and I want you to comment, Mr. Fakler. Headline: Everybody wants to live in Florida, anywhere but Miami. And this is an opinion piece written by Michael Lewis, who is the publisher over at Miami Today. Formerly worked at the Miami News. I worked for Michael Lewis. Eric, you worked for Michael Lewis,
My
correct?
first journalism
Yeah, so-
job. Very grateful to
Yeah.
Mr. Lewis, who I still refer to as Mr. Lewis, nearly 2 decades later.
This is his editorial. And Mr. Fakler, I want you to comment. Headline: Everybody wants to live in Florida, anywhere but Miami. If we believe our own publicity, Miami-Dade is booming as people from across the nation rush to live here and our population soars. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your view, it just ain't so. The fact is, the county's population is nearly 15,000 people smaller, yes, smaller than it was just at the start of the pandemic 4 years ago. That's what U.S. Census numbers released last week show. Don't be misled by the Census Bureau's news release that Florida's absolutely booming in population growth, with 4 of the nation's 5 fastest growing metropolitan areas last year being in the state. The report is true, but it doesn't mention Miami-Dade, which trails far behind the rest of the state's 14 metropolitan areas in population flows. Since April 1st of 2020, of Florida's 67 counties, 60 have added people as residents from the rest of the nation flocked to the state. The 7 losers were 5 small and poor population counties in North Florida, our neighbors Monroe County, which is the Florida Keys, and surprise, Miami-Dade County. So, Mr. Fakler, why don't you give us your take as to Mr. Lewis's and his reading of the numbers?
Well, there was a couple of interesting nuggets that Mr. Lewis mentioned in his editorial. Apparently, there's been an exodus of middle-class workers, these same workers that were drawn in by the lucrative promises of new tech jobs. What happened was they came and then they left, or they never came. And basically, they're comparing the numbers, which includes, by the way, the international, which seems like still getting a huge number of international residents into Miami, but they're mostly very rich or they're very poor. And anybody who's middle class seems to be moving away. And, when you look at the numbers, when you comparatively to all the other counties and all the other cities within Florida, I mean, Miami is dead in the water. So you wonder how this is going to affect things going forward as far as development of new condos, new apartments. What's going to happen here going forward, I think it was something that was a concern that Mr. Lewis pointed out in the piece.
Now, Mr. Fakler, let me ask you one follow-up question until I open up to the floor. So there's a line in the editorial now near the bottom that says, it's highly troubling that qualified people who actually work here leave in greater numbers than they can be replaced. So,
Yes.
Mr. Fakler, if the real workers are leaving and we get 15,000 people less than we did prior to the pandemic, how can rents go up?
That I'm not really sure. Miami's a quirky place as far as that goes. There's a certain thinking about even when you go shopping for groceries, suddenly, business is slow, but they raise the prices. So I'm wondering if this, we've talked about that in the past. So I'm wondering if there's sort of like a thinking that goes into it that, okay, listen, this is the way we're going to recap our money. We're not getting new residents, so let's raise the prices. I don't know if that's the reason, but, it wouldn't surprise me because Miami's very quirky when it comes to that.
Eric, Mr. Gruss, can either of you sort of answer that question? If we got 15,000 people less than we did, if the qualified people who are actually working can't be replaced, why are rents going up?
So all the market data I've seen over the last, let's say, 4 quarters is that rents have actually softened in my
Okay.
So rents, they may not be going down in a significant way, but they've certainly flatlined. The pandemic era rent frenzy has certainly cooled off in a major way.
Okay.
So I'm going to quibble with Mr. Lewis's headline, which admittedly is catchy in the sense that I think the original headline is that people want to live in Florida but don't want to live in Miami. That's the headline. It's people can't live in Miami. The desire is there, the ability to, and John nailed it, where there's been a complete evaporation of the middle class. And by the way, this was exacerbated by the pandemic. It's not a new trend, and not to personalize everything and make my own story a microcosm for what's going on. But in 2013, my wife and I would have loved to stay in Coral Gables. I mean, we were renting in the Gables. We're at a point where we wanted to buy. We wanted to figure out where we were going to buy. Do you think, somebody who was still a journalist, and my wife was 1 or 2 years removed from a journalist, was going to be able to buy anything in and around Coral Gables? So what happens is your first-time buyers, your middle class, when it comes time to really start their lives and put down roots, they go up north. And for us, it was Cooper City. And if you went to my neighborhood, you would see so many cops that work in Miami-Dade. I have a Miami Shores cop a couple doors down from me, Miami Beach, you name it, teachers who work in Miami-Dade County, firefighters. They're all settling and buying and it's all the same demo, recently married or married for a few years, maybe one kid, or they move there and start a family. That was the migration in 2013. What's happened now is people are getting priced out of Broward and going north, and getting priced out of Palm Beach County and going to St. Lucie and on and all the way up the state. But the pandemic really exacerbated it because we had so much wealth flowing in to Miami. And, that's why a lot of the tech bros packed their things up and went to California because they realized, the CEOs bought these incredible homes and penthouses here and did the tax harvesting thing here and leased, did expensive record-setting office leases in Wynwood and in Brickell. But then they realized there wasn't anywhere where their rank and file employees could live.
Exactly.
Sean, let me just ask you, based on what Eric had mentioned, a lot of things are sort of unpacked there, but at the end of the day, if you got fewer people, shouldn't rents go down?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, there's a tsunami of apartments that's coming. I mean, it's just a huge number of apartments are being developed and built, and that is going to for sure drive down rents.
One of the criticisms of the Federal Reserve when they're going ahead and they're running inflation numbers, they're coming out with CPI. One of the things is that housing data is supposed to be old. It's supposed to be late. It's not supposed to be pertaining to what's really going on. I know from running statistics, it's virtually impossible to get your hands on good rental information. It's all just a survey. There's no way to really track it like there are transactions where there's a deed recorded and there's some sort of third party. Do you think part of this argument that rents are going up is simply the fact that the landlords who are providing this information on a voluntary survey are simply just lying? Is that a possibility?
Well, if you're a landlord, you certainly don't want rents to go down. And you're not going to, the Chamber of Commerce is not going to talk down the market. I mean, the Realtor Association is not going to talk down the market. I mean, everybody who has a vested interest in keeping rents high is not going to talk down the market. As far as population, the population trends, I mean, the fact of the matter is Miami-Dade is built out. So there's no big tracts of land left to develop to build, thousands of units. So, I mean, I think sometimes when you're comparing, say, Miami-Dade's population to other counties, and you're like, wow, look, see, Miami-Dade isn't growing at all. Well, that's because we're out of land. As far as the rents are concerned, I think that if you look at Florida's history, and I'm talking about housing prices too. I mean, the state is boom and bust, and if you had come here in 2008 or 2009, there would have been plenty of affordable housing. I mean, you could have picked up a bunch of foreclosed homes, So, I mean, this is just like the history of Florida is boom and bust. And during booms, I mean, housing affordability is a terrible problem. I mean, look back at 2005. You look back at 2004 and 2005 and see exactly the same stories about affordable housing, everybody complaining, people are leaving, people won't come to Florida, it's too expensive. Boom, great financial crisis, like plenty of affordable housing. Everybody piles back into Florida. Florida's the number one fastest growing state. Everybody's piling in, buying up all these cheap homes. And all of a sudden, all these homes are now expensive. I mean, it's the story of Florida.